Liz Truss is remarkably young for her position, and that does speak to her political and survival skills. 47 years old. Britain has certainly had very young prime ministers before. No one even closely approached William Pitt the Younger, who in 1783 became prime minister at 24 years old. But then again, that was middle age in the 18th century. So this is clearly a woman who knows what she's doing, but not in foreign policy, unfortunately, as what you mentioned demonstrated. I don't see any difference between Ms. Truss's premiership and that of Boris Johnson. First of all, she implemented the foreign policy that he sort of defined, and they worked hand in glove on the Ukraine crisis. Moscow, from everything that I've read, doesn't expect any changes and has really sort of more or less given up on expecting anything positive from London. But the real problem here is that Britain's domestic issues, as Europe's domestic issues, are now inextricably tied to Ukraine. You simply can no longer separate these things. Yes, the COVID pandemic left a very unfortunate and heavy economic and financial legacy, but the Ukraine conflict, and especially the sanctions that were slapped on to Russia with sort of maniacal glee and consistency, were not terribly well thought through. So the Ukraine issue is not only not a sideshow, it is one of the central issues going forward, domestically as well as internationally. I've heard nothing to suggest that Liz Truss will change anything, and the massive energy and therefore economic, financial, and inflationary crisis that all of Europe, Britain including, is going into this fall is a direct consequence of that. So we'll see what happens. The Russians at this point, it sounds like, are simply sitting back and waiting for nature to take its course, to quote a very famous British film from the 1960s.